Hi everyone. It's nice to see you. Nice to be here. Thank you for coming. It's a great joy to be. We make up this temple. It's all imagined, but life is imagined anyway. So, so we managed to do it here online, and. So I've been thinking about, we just did a 6-day retreat actually, and it was it's a profound and also strange experience to do a retreat like that, because we just subject ourselves to it and then something changes in us. It transforms us in some way. And I don't know that most really beautiful things can only be described by poetry or painting or music or something, but something settles in us and changes, and so I find we're simultaneously more at peace with whatever arises, and also more tuned into whatever that vastness that we call spiritual is, like that. And so I wanted to talk a bit about that. When I took me a long time to think of retreats as a vessel, as a container, but then I noticed how much the kind of pressure and cooking and fire and all the good alchemical processes go on in a retreat, and they go on inside. Who do they go in inside? Me. And you. And so it's like, it's impossible not to be touched by them. And even if you want, sometimes we're just trying too hard, and we really want to be touched, and then that makes it harder to be touched. But then we eventually, the retreat somehow, I don't know, softens us or makes us more open to things, more open to each other. And all sorts of wild things happen in retreat, It's this very managed environment. The retreats we do are originally designed by the Chinese and the Japanese. And so, you sit still and let it happen to you, basically. And of course, in American life, that really leads to all sorts of pressures and rages and resentments and madness. and so and it's sort of part of it, really, the person who, there was a kind of a sort of mildly famous person in Los Angeles who, whenever he did a big retreat, he was a very sincere student, but at about day 3, he'd decide, I can't do this anymore. He'd pack up all his gear and he'd go outside and he'd find his car and he'd load his gear in his car and he'd sit in his car for a couple of hours, and then he'd take his gear out and go back into the Zendo, unpack it and go back and sit again. And so that was his way of doing the retreat over and over again. I kind of like that. We had a guy this time who kind of always has a problem with authority, but he was kind of wild, and he would. I remember noticing, like, he brought he had a round glowing ball that would go on and off when it moved, and he went into the tea ceremony. He brought it and it was in his teacup, and people. And it was like, there's this glowing ball. It's not exactly the thing you're supposed to have in a Zendo, And was he informed about that? Yes, he was. And he was doing lots of stuff like that. And one thing I noticed, I was because I'm teaching it, and I'm down in this deep place, and I just looked at it and I said, "Oh, glowing ball, teacup," and then I just sort of went on. And eventually the person who runs the Zendo is called the head of the practice, and he came to me and said, it's getting worse for that guy. I said, okay, ask him to leave. But it was like, I thought, I noticed that glowing ball, but it was just like noticing a shooting star or something. So you're in a very deep place, and we have to both preserve the container and also allow the weirdness that arises, because the weirdness is actually close to awakening, that arises when the strange forces inside us also free us. And so it's not a matter of calming your mind or getting rid of the things you disapprove of in your mind. It's a deeper, wider thing than disapproving of your mind. And I love that quality. And some people, find retreat very hard. I guess I'm just talking about what it's like to be in the container. And if you're a teacher or a leader, and you just try to preserve the container, keep people silent, things like that, stop them bringing glowing blue balls into the tea ceremony. And it's all sort of objective, really. It's not a personal thing. I don't mind glowing blue balls, but it's an attack on the container. So, and if you can keep the container sealed in a certain way, like don't bring your iPhone into the Zendo thing. Don't bring your iPhone into the retreat if you can possibly help it. That sort of thing. And so one guy had a perfect excuse. He's playing with his iPhone during the talk, during one of the talks, and it turns out his hearing aids are connected to his iPhone, which is fine, But you could tell then sometimes he was just like looking at his iPhone. So it's very tempting to slide from one to the other. So all that stuff, all the busyness of life, in some way, we need to be at peace with, and some of it's inevitable. Like he had to play with his iPhone to hear, but if you can be at peace with it all, it's a beautiful thing, and you'll find that that funny thing that everybody. Basha has this famous poem about at the moon viewing party, no one has a beautiful face, which is a kind of tenderness towards his old friends, who are all kind of worn haiku poets sitting around watching the moon, drinking sake, and homely people. But there's a tenderness there, and in retreat, everyone. It's kind of a commonplace, really. Everyone has a beautiful face. Everyone even has beautiful feet, because you're walking around in meditation and you see their feet, and everyone's got beautiful feet. So it's sort of like that, and I think I used to watch my mind a lot when I was first in retreat, because I really felt like I needed some sort of deep change of heart, which is probably true, because there's all this sort of forces and madness in me. And came out of this kind of tough world and everybody was, like I came out of a tough family in a way, and then I went and worked with Aboriginal land rights in Australia, and so that was sort of tough too. I mean, I liked it; it was fine by me, but sometimes, you had to have a bodyguard and things like that sort of thing. So. A beautiful, sweet old boxer from Queensland would be my bodyguard sometimes. It was kind of sweet. And then I found that I had to meditate in that. And meetings would be in a pub and people would be drinking, but I had to have, not separating myself, but inside that I had to have my peace. And in the end, I realized, well, it was time for me to get out of there, and white people to get out of there and stuff. But it was a beautiful time, really. And then I went into a monastery and took up Zen like in a deeper way. So yeah, I think one of the things is that you're never not in a place where the meditation can touch you. You're never not in a place where the sacredness of the world is actually already in your heart. And if you just look into the silence or look inside your own heart, it's there. So there's that. And and there's a kind of peaceful, I guess it's peace, but you don't mind non-peaceful things, which is what the blue ball was about in Sky, who was getting crazier and crazier. And I thought he was going down, but no, he was going up. And I said to him, "You're going up, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes, yes, I am," thrilled way. And so some kinds of, it's like a possession by a spirit or something. And it was great. And so the only conversation I had with him, I said, "Well, you're getting kind of, you're in your early 60s and you've been on and off like this. You had these crazy episodes all your life, and you're a kind of creative, interesting person. And have you ever thought of retiring? You could just, you just retire. Just don't be crazy, and or retire from your career of being crazy and bringing blue balls into the center." So, going into the place was run by nuns, and going into the kitchen and terrifying the nuns, things like that. So and he said, "Oh, I feel understood," but it didn't help him at all. So he then disappeared somewhere. So yeah, it's something about the peace that's always with us and is there. And I want to read a couple of poems. These are kind of old favorite poems. This is James Wright, and I think Jean Foster is on here, and she was very close to James Wright at one stage, but nod to Jean. "Lying in a hammock at William Duffy's farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Over my head, I see the hawks are having a party up there, sort of terrifying people. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly asleep on the black trunk, glowing like a leaf in green shadow. Down the ravine, behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distance of the afternoon. Down the ravine, behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distances of the afternoon. To my right, in a field of sunlight between two pines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I lean back as the evening darkens and comes on. A chicken hawk floats over, looking for home. I have wasted my life. It's a great last line. I remember William Merwin saying something like, he loves that. Oh, maybe, I can't remember if it's Merwin, but he loves that last line because it's obviously so untrue. But it's the spirit of, if I were meditating, I would be doing something. If my life was useful, I would be doing something. Here I am, watching it all. So that's part of. So I think that's just part of the being in the vessel in Sesshin. It's a nice thing. And then another thing that happened in Sesshin is Jordan McConnell, who plays a bunch of different kinds of music, but the Uilleann pipes, the Irish Uilleann pipes, as well as being a guitar maker and a guitar player. But he came up with a suggestion that he would play, I would read the Seamus Heaney poem, The Given Note, which is a famous poem about this kind of something marvelous and spooky, this song given to a traditional fiddler, I think, who went on the Isles of Western Ireland, the Blaskets, they're called. And he went out in the bad weather and in this dry stone hut, and they heard it on the wind. And there are two, Jordan researched the history of this song. He said there are two theories. One is it was the fairies, and the other is it was humpback whales. But there's a third theory, it was fairies and humpback whales who gave them the song. So I want to read The Given Note. And someday when we can work out the bagpipes on Zoom, Jordan will play it for us. The given note: on the most westerly blasket in a dry stone hut. He got this air out of the night. Strange noises were heard by others who followed, bits of a tune coming in on loud weather. Though nothing like melody, bits of a tune coming in on loud weather, though nothing like melody. He blamed their fingers and ears and practiced their fiddling easy, for he had gone alone into the island and brought back the whole thing. The house throbbed like his full violin. So whether he calls it spirit music or not, I don't care. He took it out of wind off mid-Atlantic. Still he maintains from nowhere. It comes off the bow gravely, rephrases itself into the air. That's James Heaney is so wonderful. So I think what I want to do now is, so that seems like two parts of a retreat. There's that lying in a hammock on William Duffy's farm, and also then hearing the vast spiritual kind of forces of life and being in a way moved by them and also taught by them and carried, I would say. I'd say that the word Tao means anything. It's that which carries us when we're not trying to interfere with our lives, when we're trusting our lives. And the thing about the idea of a vessel, is an old, I don't know, Greek idea, Alexandrian idea, I guess. And whatever goes in it gets transformed by heat, pressure, whatever the transforming agent is. And a retreat feels kind of like that. There's this lumpy, dark, his dark materials, lumpy dark materials, and then gradually, I don't know, something happens and moonlight appears, things like that in the retreat, and so no basis to rely on. When you enjoy that, that's the moonlight, and kind of freedom. There's much more to go after that, but if you can get to the moonlight, that's nice work. So it's a good day's work. So and there's that freedom in a kind of spaciousness in the heart, and so we're not comparing and nursing grudges and things like that. So that's a good thing. So I wanted to ask a couple of people to comment who were at the retreat. And Tess, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think the notion of staying, we talked at the beginning, I was really thinking about that this time, and how someone told me a story kind of midway in the retreat, that she was sitting just as the afternoon was starting, and then it's going to be the sutra service. And she had this wave come over her of, I just hate everyone. I hate everyone here. And this is a surprisingly common thought that happens for people sometime during retreat. There are variations on it, which can be, everyone hates me. This is these are the wrong people. But it's whatever our particular way of, I guess, in the way you're talking, not letting things cook us, holding something off. But she just felt this tremendous wave of hate. And she just decided, all right, I'll just hate everyone then, but I'll still do the sutra service. I'll still be here. And as soon as the music started, she just started weeping and thought, I love everyone here. which is your, no foundation to rely upon, disorderly karmic consciousness with no foundation to rely upon. And it feels like in a retreat, I mean, it feels like in life, but I think you come to contend with it during retreat. That's just always how it goes. You think, I can't sit here one more second. I'm going to die if I don't, go do whatever, or if I have to be with these people, or if I have to be with this person, or whatever it is. But if you can just stay, it always moves. And sometimes it takes a lot of periods. Sometimes it takes a couple days. Sometimes it takes, fighting with your teacher. Sometimes it takes like whatever it is, but to just stay. And I was thinking, you were talking a little bit about, alchemy. I was thinking about the notion of the way the alchemists thought of their work was the microcosm and the macrocosm. And that, you have your little microcosm you're working with here, but you're also part of the macrocosm. And in a way, in retreat, it's always interesting to watch how, as you tend here, that seems to somehow accord and correspond and influence with what happens here. And as everyone else is sort of pooling their practice and rowing together, then that somehow influences here. And there's something both kind of nice knowing that in some way you're not doing anything and it's working on you, but the little bit of work that you can do is somehow helping, everyone. And the last thing, and kind of in that respect, I was noticing this time just how much ritual comes to serve the vessel and what becomes possible. And I was watching, it always feels at the beginning of the retreat that somehow we're performing the rituals, and by the end, the rituals seem to be performing us. The sword that the head of practice walks around starts to walk him around, or that the bows just arise from someplace different. But somehow that we have rituals seems to hold us in staying when it's hard to do by ourselves. So, don't know. Those are some thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, I think also the one thing I used to have that feeling of like, I've got it. Day 3 was always a hard day when I was many years ago, when I was subjecting myself to this, because I thought I needed to be subjected to something. There's a lot of poetry in this tradition. This would have to do. And also I'd gone out in the forest and in a way sat through the night in the forest. But then I needed more teaching than the trees were giving me. So then, but then at some stage I started to notice that the dark materials are kind of interesting. And if I dodge the dark materials, it's not good. You can't. You have to go down in order to come up. It's another old alchemical thing. But thank you. Do you have anything more to say about the dark materials?
Well, maybe just that, like in that person's example, but in everyone's example, it sort of seems like it's always about holding something off, which might be actually something beautiful. Oftentimes is something beautiful about the world. Like sitting in Dokusan this time with someone who kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason, this was her first time with us, and it's hard, it's an intense thing to subject yourself to, as you say. And for some reason, I could just feel her holding off, warmth toward her. And she said this story about, the person sitting next to her. She tried to keep all her stuff out of everyone's way, and the person just said, "Oh, you're all right," something like that. "It's all right." And she started weeping because the kindness of the world just completely undid her. And for some reason, I found myself saying to her, "You're a lovely person." And I could feel she just said, "Well, I'm all right. I think I'm all right," or something like that. And I said, "No, you're a lovely person." And she just started like let that in was so much, because the dark material arises by always somehow thinking that's not true, or not wanting to believe it's true, or something like that. And I don't know, sometimes just to feel that it's all right and we're all right together is almost more than we can bear, but seems a worthwhile thing to do. And by the last morning, I'm always struck, by how still everything's been cooked down for a while, and you just get to taste that stillness together for a while. And some people have to leave early because that's just more than they can bear. Yeah, maybe just that.
Thank you. I like that story about that thing about hating everyone. That seems like a legitimate part of the human psyche. Hating yourself, hating other people. There's a famous medieval teacher called Hakuin Ekaku, who has this great record of, at that time, I became disgusted with meditation and spirituality in general, and was convinced I was surrounded by wicked and evil people. And so I left, and I decided to spend my time on poetry and drinking sake. And so, and then he came back and became a great teacher. But I kind of like the poetry bit. So yeah, Angela Rockell are you still here? Angela, yes, she is from the far south of Tasmania, and it's like early morning in the dark, long dark nights at the moment for you. So tell us something.
Well, it's a kind of a literalization of the disorderly consciousness here, as always. We've had days and weeks of, I don't know whether you can see my breath is cloudy with the cold, of low, cold, grey, foggy mornings which don't lift into sunshine, and there's more grey above, and that's gone on for weeks. And just tonight, the sky has cleared and it's bright moonlight. So, and our rooster is beside himself with happiness, even though it's the middle of the night. He's crowing and crowing and crowing and clapping his wings and crowing some more. So happiness in the moonlight is here.
Thanks, Angela. It's like we have a lot of bird events here because it's summer. During the meditation, I could hear I don't know if you could hear the quail going, that loud clucking they do, and they're taking they're taking 5 very, very tiny quails, very tiny quail, very fluffy quail, on a tour of the garden. This is where seeds can be found. This is where you hide if something comes along. And it's the very first tour, and little quail would fall behind, then run to catch up and wipe out. And they tumble over running so fast. It's a nice. The birds are a great measure of the human heart. Thanks, Angela. And John Joseph is here somewhere. Here he is. Do you have anything to say, John?
It was a marvelous session for me because I didn't go for a time. And that was so different from me to make that decision not to go. I had a medical procedure just beforehand, and I thought, well, maybe I should give it space and I should give it time. And those like 4 days that I was not at session, it was wonderful. The weather was beautiful. I was out in the garden weeding, but I was weeding and I was thinking, oh, they're sitting now. Or I was having lunch and oh, they're eating now. And oh, now the talk is going on. So in a way, I was and I wasn't at session, and then I got an opportunity to go, and it was that too was just lovely because the last day and a half or 2 days, I didn't have to teach. I didn't have to talk. I just could just sit in the zendo, and I just really, really enjoyed that. And it was a nice thing to be able to give myself and maybe ourselves permission to do something different. You know, we get in this pattern, I think, of 20 years every time, go to session, and sometimes it's nice to break that pattern and feel that freshness and that sort of that insubstantiality, that sort of humble, I don't know, that quality underneath it that you talk about.
Alison, do you have anything to contribute at this moment?
I do. Well, first of all, where the room I usually sit is my internet was unstable, and so I thought, I'll just move outside. So I'm outside now on the deck, and about in the middle of the meditation, I hear the quail, and then I see them, the parents, and then I see a couple of little tiny. They're so small and so light. They seem to be lighter than actually oxygen weighs. So that if you just blow on them, they start to, fly up in the air and fly away like those little puff balls that you can blow on. And so that was marvelous. And I was also thinking of the disorderly karmic consciousness and something you said early on in the meditation where you said, madness is very close to awakening. And I thought about Sesshin and how that's very true. Somehow that madness is like the final clinging on to some kind of order in my consciousness to try to stabilize it while it's falling apart. And I got this image of the event horizon in black holes where, everything is being pulled apart and stretched apart and disintegrating. And madness is a bit like that. And then I thought of someone who that would come to me day after day in Dokusan, and there was an ongoing trouble in the Zendo over the tea ceremony, and didn't have to do with glowing balls, but it was she started to have this profound objections to the way that the tea server was serving the tea. And so she was so upset about this that even though she something in her kept saying, don't say it, it's silent in the Zendo, where it's the middle of the ritual, you cannot say anything in the Zendo. And she saw herself, to her own horror, say something in the Zendo to the tea server, only 2 people at a time, not 3 or something like this. And so she's horrified that she's done this. She comes to see me in Dokusan, but she was very much making a case about how she was right, that was the wrong way to do the tea. And then the next day it was about, she felt that the tea server was serving the tea in an unsafe manner, and that the hot tea was going to come all over her. And so she came up with a whole plan to get her teacup ready. She even had it on her lap so she could thrust it into his face before he poured the tea. And then she started to have all these thoughts that, and then the next day, she just went on strike. She said, I am not having tea. I am just going to basically show him how right I am, how unsafe it is, and I'm not having tea. And then she started to have these feelings that even though it was just silent, he hadn't said a word to her, that he was giving her looks that, even outside the Zendo, that she was sure he was harboring all kinds of ill will towards her. So she finds herself writing an email in the middle of the night that gets longer and longer and longer. And she's just about to send it. And then she thinks, I don't know, I think she might have heard the talk disorderly karmic consciousness. And she doesn't send it. And then she goes to sleep that night. She wakes up in the morning and it's vanished. The entire drama is just vanished. There was no foundation to rely on. And she comes in the next day and she said, you know, he's giving me all these sweet looks now. It's just amazing. It's astonishing. There's no foundation to rely on.
Thank you. That's great. You see, the tempest in the session, in the teacups, in everywhere. Okay. I wanted to hear from Todd. Did you have anything you wanted to say? Todd was the guy who's always in the dojo during sitting and retreat.
Yeah, sure. I was struck at the very beginning of the talk here today. You said this phrase, it's kind of been resonating with me. It's your job to be you, you said. And it's kind of nice. I don't have to worry too much. But then my mind immediately starts to go to, well, what's a me supposed to do? And more importantly, what's a me supposed to do well? And what's a me not supposed to do badly, kind of thing. And at retreat, as John said, my job was to be head of practice, which has a lot of there are a lot of things that you do, a lot of rituals. Actually, we don't do that much, but what's there, I think, is a really nice amount. And when I was learning to do this and getting into it, it seemed very daunting, and it seemed very hard that I would have to do all these things in a particular way, and I couldn't do them wrong. And it also, like in this retreat, when it became clear that I was going to have to ask somebody to leave, it became a little bit stressful. But I also was approaching it. It also felt like something that I had to attain, like some achievement badge I was going to get to wear, like from the Boy Scouts, have kicked somebody out of retreat or something like that. And it was a little, it was a little daunting. But what happens in retreat, and what I think this is really the place where I noticed this first, was there is a thing, this container that John was talking about, that stuff just kind of happens, and you can rely on stuff happening. You can rely on the fact that there's a container and there's a shape to it, and there are people in there that are that sort of pool of energy that Tess was talking about that's going on. And it does actually just kind of carry you along in a way that's really, really nice. And so, after a while, doing the rituals, walking the stick around or whatever it is, it just doesn't feel like something that I'm doing at all. It just feels like something that's just that we're doing, the container's doing. And even when it came to actually asking this person to leave, it just didn't feel like anything that I was doing. It just felt like something that was happening. And being in retreat is kind of the first place where I really noticed that that's how the world works, kind of all the time. I have my ideas about how things are going to go and how I'm going to perform X, Y, or I'm going to do these tasks and whether I'll do them well or not do them well. And then there's the way in which it just sort of happens. And it's really marvelous. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful experience. I really had a great time there, and so nice to see all of you and to be with you and just to be in that container together, transforming in our own space, in the larger space. It's really quite marvelous. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, it's not us doing it, really. I like that. That's the whole notion of the Tao. It's not personal. And even that guy who was causing trouble, it wasn't personal to him. That was just what the Tao was doing through him. No need for anybody to be cranky about. So, yeah. Amanda, do you have anything you'd like to say?
sure. I just like that thing about subjecting yourself to retreat. That's certainly what it's felt like to me. And just for whatever reason, had kind of a string of retreats where things got pretty rough inside my mind. And I don't even really know what I want to say about it, just that in a way it's felt a lot of the time this past retreat, I just was getting cooked in some way and kind of like helplessly watching my mind tie itself in knots and fend off the experience of being in retreat. And like trying to then untangle myself, but the more I try to untangle myself, the more tangled I get. And just the pain of that. And then finally it's like, well, at least my body is in the zendo and my butt is on the chair. And then I don't know, it's so painful to kind of notice myself putting myself in hell and knowing that the doorway out is always right here and not really being able to take it. But finally, it seems like for my last 2 or 3 retreats, then I get out of retreat, and in the following week, everything starts to settle down in my mind. And I start trusting the process and the cooking that was happening. And I don't know, I'm not sure what to say about it, just that I'm grateful for it. And it's hard, and something in me just keeps feeling so defensive during sesshin, but it's just more interesting to trust it than to not trust it, I think. So that's it for me.
That's great. That's what I decide. What's my choice? I have to trust it or trust the Tao. It's part of trusting one's own life that it unfolds. It's